Hello, my name is Michael Cahill. In this video, we're going to be looking at threats to digital assets and data, as well as the importance of implementing best practice risk management processes. Now, the key threat that we are going to be looking at relates to cyber security. So we'll start off with this article here of a major cyber attack against the New South Wales Labour Party. Now, in this case, cyber criminals were able to access its network and steal sensitive information. This information included driver's licenses, images of passports, as well as employment contracts. Now, the interesting thing here is the cyber criminals demanded a ransom or are demanding a ransom. And the threat is that if the ransom is not paid, then the information will be released to the public. Now, this is just an example of one of those high-profile cyber attacks here in Australia. Now, the Australian Cyber Security Centre is an organization that works with the government as well as businesses to combat cyber attacks. Now, this organization deals with quite a number of incidents every year. Now, in the case of 2019, 2020, and 2020, the organization dealt with about 2,200 incidents. Now, this is a report. It's an annual cyber report from the ACSC. And as you can see there, the most frequent incident was malicious email followed by compromised system. Now, you and I have probably received, I'm sure you have probably received an email, a malicious email with a malicious link, and there's this temptation to click on a link so that you can either win something or so that you can do something. And these are phishing emails. Now, the next one there is compromised systems, and this is where the attackers actually access the network of the organization. And so this is these are the two most frequent type of incidents reported to the ACSC. Now, the least frequent incident is denial of service. Now, denial of service is where attackers bombard a network with illegitimate requests, and their intention is to overwhelm the system and disrupt services. Now, you'll also note from this graph here, or this chart here, that ACSC deals with about 10% of the incidents relates to data exposure, theft, or leak, similar to what we saw when we were discussing the New South Wales Labour Party incident. And so that is about 10% of all the incidents that the organization deals with. Now, remember that chart that we discussed earlier, this chart here, or this graph here, only deals with the frequency of incidents. This one here now deals with the severity of those incidents. Now, the ACSC categorizes these incidents on a scale of 1 to 6, with 1 being most severe and 6 being least severe. So you can see the most severe incidents are the ones that relate to the denial of services, so sustained disruption of essential services, which we saw was actually the least reported incidents when it comes to frequency. But those are the ones with the most significant impact to organizations and to Australia. Now, the next one that has a very significant impact is the deletion or damage of key sensitive information, and this includes intellectual property. So you can see, if we use this, you can see there that those are the key, most severe incidents. Now, you will also see down here that it's the state, the federal government offices, as well as large organizations that really feel that significant impact when it comes to those incidents. And so that is how the graph appears. So you can see there that the two, and I'll just show you there, those are the two key most severe incidents reported to the ACSC. Now, going back to the New South Wales Labour Party, the question now that will be asked is, did this organization have a robust risk management processes? How come these cyber criminals were able to penetrate the systems and actually access the sensitive information? And so there'll be a lot of questions around how robust the risk management process for this organization is. Now, what is a robust risk management process? This is ideally the structure of a robust risk management process. Now you can see there that part of that process is establishing the context, risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, and the like. And so the main questions that will be asked of the New South Wales Labour Party is, first of all, did this organization identify this type of a cyber attack as a risk? Does this risk actually exist in its risk register? Now, if this doesn't exist in its risk register, it means that the risk team failed in identifying risks that are relevant to the organization. Now, it's possible that this risk was identified. So the next question is, was the impact of this risk calculated correctly? Whether you're talking about the reputational impact or the dollar impact, was this actually calculated correctly? The third question there is, was this risk evaluated correctly? Yes, the organization might have gotten the consequence correct, but did it get the likelihood of this risk occurring correct? Was it prioritized correctly? Was it ranked correctly in the organization, especially when compared to, say, the risk appetite of the New South Wales Labour Party? Another question that will be asked is, what type of controls were implemented or put in place by the New South Wales Party to mitigate this risk? Now, you would hope that the party had some level of controls. It would be very bad if it came up that there were no adequate control, or there were no controls to mitigate this type of risk. Now, obviously, the other key things that you want to see in the New South Wales Labour Party is whether the top level leadership was communicating with the IT team. What's the quality of communication that occurs in the organization? And the final one there is, what are the monitoring and review mechanisms that this party had over risk management? Now, this is a table here that or a matrix that shows how risks are prioritized in an organization. And so in the case of the New South Wales Labour Party, you would hope that that risk was actually ranked or categorized as either high or extreme. Now, for that to have happened, the likelihood of the risk should have been set as very high, as well as the consequence of the risk. So in this case, you would hope that the impact of the risk was either set as major or catastrophic, that this could be catastrophic to the organization if a cyber attack of this nature occurred. But also the likelihood should have been set as quite high, either likely or almost certain, that it's almost certain that cyber attackers or cyber criminals will target the organization. Now, it is possible that the organization may have set a minor impact or an unlikely impact. So if we take that as an example. Now, if that happened, that means that the risk would be categorized as low. And so that means that the top leadership and the organization would not have prioritized this particular risk. Now, what are the avenues available to the New South Wales Labour Party when it comes to managing this risk? There are normally four ways a risk can be addressed. One is to accept the risk and do nothing. And this tends to happen when it's just in the nature of the operations. Maybe the organization is, say, operating in a country that is inherently risky. There's nothing the organization can do about that. And so it accepts that risk and does pretty much cannot do much about it. The next thing that an organization can do is to avoid the risk completely. And that might mean that it might choose not to deal with that type of risk. So it might choose to change its business objectives so that it does not deal with that type of risk. Now, for the New South Wales Party, it is unlikely that it can avoid dealing with personal or personally identifiable information. And so those two, accept and avoid, are really not options for the New South Wales Party. So the key options that it has here is either to transfer the risk or manage the risk itself. And so transferring the risk could be transferring the management of data or the storage of data to, say, a cloud provider, which has a very good security or IT security. The other alternative is to manage the risk, the party managing the risk itself. And that means that the party needs to implement very strong IT controls to manage such a risk. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how the Labour Party managed this risk. Now that this risk has materialized, remember now, in the case of the New South Wales Labour Party, this is no longer just a risk. It's an event that has occurred. Cyber criminals have actually accessed the network, and they have stolen sensitive information. And so what is the incident response plan that the New South Wales Labour Party should come up with or should implement? The first thing that they should do is identify what actually occurred, the nature of the attack. How did this attack occur? What assets and data were affected? How did the cyber criminals manage to penetrate the systems and access the data? So those are the questions that need to be asked in that first stage or the first step. The second step, once that is understood, is to isolate and contain. So basically, the organization should identify the assets that have been affected. So they might have viruses or malware, and these devices or these systems should be disconnected from the rest of the IT infrastructure. And the organization can do this by disconnecting the devices or shutting down power to such devices. The next thing there is eradication of the viruses or the malware or the infection that the cyber criminals have planted into the system. And that can happen by purging the system by using antivirus software, for example. Now, once that is done and the systems have been purged, then the next thing is to now get back to normal operations. And that's what the leadership will try and make sure that happens, that the organization gets back to that normal recovery mode. What's the final step? The final step is to do a post-incident review. And this is a very, very important step where the organization asks itself, what went wrong? How did the cyber criminals get access to the systems? What lessons have been learned from this? And so those lessons need to be communicated to all the relevant people in the organization, so the IT team, the top leadership team, and all employees, really. And what actually happens here is the training programs also need to be updated. And this, what basically happens here is cyber security awareness is created in the organization. Now, to conclude, we all know that prevention is better than cure. So it's very, very important for the organization to have a robust risk management process that ideally prevents the risk from materializing. Now, this risk management process should not only identify the risk, but also ensure that action plans and controls are implemented to mitigate that risk. Thank you.